right there. That's God. But not your Sunday school version. This is God as a massive, twisted, cosmic squirrel deity, coming to judge you for your sins. And those sins involve stapling squirrels to a corpse.
You ever have one of those nights where you're just doom scrolling through Steam looking for something, anything to play? That's how I found Squirrel Stapler, and let me tell you, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Like, look at this, look at the store page. It's got that early 2000s shareware energy. You know what I mean, those weird educational games you'd find in the discount bin at Office Depot that were probably made by like 3 people in a basement somewhere. The ones with names like Jimmy's Math Adventure, or Learn About Frogs with Professor Ribbit. Being terminally online and probably autistic means I've fallen down every possible rabbit hole of weird game preservation communities. And let me tell you, there's this whole fascinating world of shovelware. Games that were churned out super cheap and fast, usually educational stuff or just weird bargain bin games that feel like they were made in some alternate dimension, where game design evolved completely differently.
Dear Lord, may your loving hand guide Homer to the mattress square and true. Okay.
But here's the thing, Squirrel Stapler isn't actually shovelware. It's deliberately imitating that style. It's a psychological horror game made by David Szymanski, and if that name sounds familiar, yeah, he's the same person who made Iron Lung. You know, that game where you're in a janky submarine in an ocean of blood that somehow manages to be terrifying, despite looking like it was made on a computer from 1994. Yeah, that guy. Szymanski has this incredible talent for taking seemingly low-quality aesthetics and turning them into something genuinely upsetting. And with Squirrel Stapler, he managed to create one of the most uniquely disturbing games I've ever played. So let me tell you about the time I played a game about stapling squirrels to a corpse, and how it gave me an existential crisis about divine judgment. Okay, so, picture this. You wake up in a cabin. Pretty standard horror game setup, right? There's a mattress in one corner, a bucket in another. And yes, the game explicitly tells you that that's your bathroom. Very fancy. But then you look at the wall and holy shit. That's your beloved, or what's left of her. She's been skinned, dismembered, and nailed to the wall. And you, our completely stable and totally rational protagonist, think she's looking a bit ugly these days. You know, because of all the flies. But hey, you know what's beautiful? Squirrels. Oh, and just casually written near the front door? In 5 days, God is coming. Not like a metaphor or some religious tract someone slipped under your door. Nope, just a straight up warning that the Almighty is planning a house call. Cool. I wish I was making this up. So you'll grab your rifle and head out into the woods to hunt some squirrels, because obviously the solution to your dead wife looking a bit ugly nowadays is to staple some woodland creatures to a corpse. Just like Grandma used to do.
So sorry about that.
But before we go deeper into this rabbit hole, or should I say squirrel hole? No, I really shouldn't, that's awful. We need to talk about David Szymanski and the Dread X collection. If you don't know Szymanski's work outside of Iron Lung, you might know Dusk, which he developed. It's this incredible retro FPS that feels like what would happen if Quake and Blood had a baby and raised it on a steady diet of doom metal and Stephen King novels. The guy knows horror. He knows how to make you uncomfortable. And with Squirrel Stapler, he decided to make us uncomfortable in entirely new ways. The Dread X collection, for those who don't know, is this amazing series of indie horror game compilations. The concept is pretty simple. Get a bunch of talented developers, give them each a theme and a very short development time, and see what kind of nightmares that they can create. But here's what makes Squirrel Stapler special. It understands something fundamental about horror that a lot of games miss. The scariest things often come wrapped in the most innocent packages. Think about it, we're all familiar with educational games. They're safe, they're comfortable. They remind us of computer labs and rainy day activities. That's what makes Squirrel Stapler's mimicry so effective. It's like if you turned on Sesame Street and slowly realized Count Von Count was actually counting down to the apocalypse.
15, 16,
I'm sorry.
17, 18,
I'm sorry, sir.
19,
I think you're not
20
going to win.
seconds!
Let's break down how this descent into madness actually works. Day 1 starts innocently enough. Well, as innocent as anything can be when you've got a skinless corpse in your living room. The game gives you these adorably helpful tips. Use the map to orient yourself. Walk whenever possible. Stay low in the foliage. It's written in that classic edutainment tone. You know, the one that almost sounds like it's trying really hard not to patronize you, but definitely is. It's almost cute. Almost. And then you find the pentagram room. Because of course there's a pentagram room. And there's this note. Book of the Grove, chapter 4, verse 1, saith the goat of the wood. Thou shalt not staple squirrels. Can we just appreciate that for a second? In the history of religious commandments, I feel like don't staple squirrels should have been a given. Like, Moses didn't need to come down from Mount Sinai with that one. Nobody was sitting there like, but what's the Almighty's position on rodent stapling? But wait, it gets better. Scattered throughout the woods, you start finding pages of the story called The Lady. And this is where Squirrel Stapler starts showing its true colors. Because this story is messed up. Once there was a lonely artist who lived by himself in the woods. Desiring to ease his loneliness, he saved his meager earnings and purchased a fine paintbrush crafted from the hair of a beautiful woman. This story starts out like some kind of weird fairy tale, right? Just a lonely artist wanting to make something beautiful. But each day, as you're out there hunting squirrels and slowly losing your grip on reality, you find another part of this story. And it goes places. Dark places. See, what makes The Lady so effective is how it mirrors what's happening in the main game. Both stories are about men who are obsessed with preserving beauty. And both of them spiral into absolute horror. It's like, you know how in Silent Hill 2, you keep finding those fairy tale books that seem to be commenting on James's story? It's like that, but with squirrels and staples and so much worse. But now let's talk about how this story unfolds alongside the main game. Because the timing of these reveals is just mwah. So you're out there on day 2, already dealing with ghost squirrels. Yeah, ghost squirrels are a thing now. And you find the next part of the story. Our artist friend has just learned that his precious paintbrush wasn't made from a beautiful woman's hair at all. It was from a wild boar.
I'm gonna kill you.
No,
I'm gonna kill you.
No!
Yup, I'm gonna kill you.
And instead of, just buying a new brush like a normal person, he meets this old woman who offers to bring his painting to life. Because that always works out great in fairy tales, right? Absolutely nothing bad ever happens when mysterious old women offer to animate your artwork. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's this perfect parallel of obsession and consequence. The game is literally giving you 2 different stories about men who tried to possess beauty through increasingly violent means. And both of them end up... well, let's just say neither story ends with a trip to Disney World. And this is where Squirrel Stapler really shows its brilliance. Because it's not just being weird for the sake of being weird. Everything, from the educational game aesthetic to these parallel narratives, is working together to create this crushing sense of inevitability. You know that it's going to end all badly, but you can't stop reading, you can't stop hunting, and you just can't stop stapling. The game even has these reports you can find in this weird bunker, and they start getting increasingly unhinged too. It's like every piece of text in this game is slowly losing its mind along with you. Even the tutorial tips start reading less like helpful advice, and more like desperate warnings. But we need to talk about what happens next. Because this is where the game takes everything we've discussed so far and cranks it up to 11. So remember how I mentioned ghost squirrels? Yeah, let's talk about how this game just casually throws supernatural horror at you while maintaining its helpful educational game facade. Day 2 rolls around and suddenly these translucent glowing squirrels start appearing. And they're not just spooky decoration. They will absolutely murder you if you don't deal with them. But the game treats this like it's just another normal game mechanic to learn. Like it's teaching you about different types of trees or something. The daily tips even start acknowledging the danger, but in that same cheerful educational tone. Be careful, rifle noise travels far and can attract large predators. Thanks, game. Super helpful. Speaking of large predators, let's talk about the squirrel bears, because yes, of course that's a thing. These massive, horrifying creatures that are like if someone threw a bear and a squirrel into a blender, and then let whatever come out marinate in pure nightmare fuel. But what makes this all work is how the game maintains its structure. Every day you still have to go out and hunt your squirrels, you still have to bring them back, you still have to staple them to your dead wife. It's like the game is saying, yeah, there are ghost squirrels and demon bears out there, but you still have a job to do. And then there's this scene in day 3 where you come back to find your corpse wife just sitting at the dinner table, waiting for you.
What's up? Where is my skin?
Like she's expecting you to join her for a nice family meal of stapled squirrel corpses. This is where the game really starts messing with you. Because up until now, the horror has been mostly external. Spooky creatures in the woods, creepy notes, that kind of thing. But now the game starts making you question whether anything that you're seeing is actually real. Meanwhile, our story within a story has reached a point where the old woman's spell has gone horribly wrong. I couldn't see that one coming. And the half-woman the artist created is screaming and dragging herself around in circles while her entrails flop behind her.
Kill it! Kill it with fire! Everyone flee!
You know, typical educational game content. And those reports in the bunker, they've gone from some odd noises during the night, probably squirrels, to it's in the walls now, in the concrete, looking for my brain. Which, honestly, pretty relatable for anyone who spent too much time in this game. But let's not forget about the Sin Shack, possibly my favorite game mechanic ever, if only for how absurd it is. Once per day, you can visit this little building to boost your score. That's it, that's the mechanic. You just sin for points. But here's what makes all of this work. The game never breaks character. It maintains its educational game facade, even as everything descends into complete madness. The tips keep coming, the score keeps counting. The structure stays intact, even as the content becomes increasingly unhinged. And all of this is building to something. Remember that message from day 1? God is coming in 5 days. Well, we're getting close to day 5, and let me tell you, you are not ready for what happens next. So, day 5. The day God arrives. You wake up and the game gives you its final daily tip. Good luck. That's it. That's all you get. Even the game itself has given up on maintaining its facade. And the moment you step outside, you can feel that something's different. You know that feeling in horror games where familiar areas suddenly feel wrong? Like how Silent Hill does the whole dark world shift, or how PT makes you loop through the same hallway. Squirrel Stapler does something more subtle, but equally unsettling. The forest, this place you've been running around in for 4 days, just feels empty, dead. It's like everything in the forest is holding its breath, waiting for something bigger, something worse. Remember that bunker where you found all those increasingly unhinged reports? It's just silent now. The Sin Shack, which has been happily tracking your moral deterioration for the past 4 days, feels less like a quirky game mechanic and more like evidence for your upcoming trial. But here's the thing, you still have to go through the motions. The game doesn't let you just sit in your cabin and wait for judgment. No, you've still got to get your 5 regular squirrels and 1 extra large squirrel. Because apparently, even with divine judgment looming, you still got a corpse to decorate. Really got to nail that presentation for the almighty, you know? And hunting these last squirrels, it's psychological torture. Every shot feels like you're just digging your own grave deeper. Those floating health and ammo pickups that seemed so silly at the start, they're like mockeries now, little reminders of how the game tricked you into thinking that this was all just fun and games. Even the map itself feels wrong now. All those cheerful little icons marking locations, they might as well be evidence markers at a crime scene. Your crime scene. And then you get your last squirrel. In any other game, this would be it. Mission accomplished. Time to head home and get your high score. But instead, a timer appears. 2 minutes. That's all you get. And suddenly, you can't enter the cabin. You can't hide in the Sin Shack. The game forces you to just stand there and wait. And then the singing starts. It begins almost imperceptibly, just a whisper at first. God is coming. But then more voices join in. They layer over each other, some getting deeper, others higher, creating this cacophony of divine announcement that feels like it's coming from both everywhere and nowhere at once. The forest itself seems to vibrate with these voices. They keep building, getting more distorted, more wrong. If you've ever wondered what a cosmic horror choir would sound like if they were really into squirrels, well, here you go. Let's talk about what's actually happening here, because it's brilliant game design. You spent 4 days in this forest, you know every tree, every path, you've dealt with ghost squirrels and demon bears. You've probably got your favorite hunting spots, your escape routes all planned out. And now the game just takes all of that away. No threats to shoot, no places to hide, just you and this timer, counting down to your judgment. It's like the game is saying, you wanted to play hunter? Fine, now let's see how you feel being prey. And those voices, they're not just spooky background music. They're a countdown of their own. With each new layer of voices, with each repetition of God is coming, you can feel the reality of your situation sinking in. This isn't just some weird hunting simulator gone wrong. This is judgment, this is consequence. This is the bill coming due for every squirrel that you've stapled, every sin you've committed in that little shack, every moment you spent trying to make a corpse beautiful again. The voices reach their peak. God is here. Now I could show you what God looks like in this game, but I don't think I will. Not because it's too scary, although it absolutely is, but because describing it is way more fun. Imagine if you took a squirrel, made it the size of a building, stripped away everything that made it cute, exposed its brain, gave it these writhing, twisted appendages, and then had it judge you for all your squirrel stapling sins. That's what you're facing, and it's perfect. Because what could be more fitting than being judged by a corrupted version of the very creatures that you've been hunting? It's like if every squirrel you killed, every body you stapled to that corpse, came back as one massive divine entity of judgment. You know how in the Bible, whenever angels appear to people, the first thing they always say is, "Be not afraid."
Be not afraid.
That's because divine beings in their true form are supposed to be terrifying. They're not the cute little cherubs you see on Valentine's cards. They're cosmic entities that human minds can barely comprehend. Squirrel Stapler understands this. It takes this grand religious concept of divine judgment and filters it through its own twisted lens. Instead of a traditional angel or deity, you get this massive corrupted squirrel thing. And somehow that's more terrifying than any conventional religious imagery could be. And then it ends. Black screen. You win. Here's your score, because nothing says congratulations on your divine judgment like a high score table. But that ending, that you win, it's the final joke in a game full of dark humor. Did you win? What exactly did you win? The right to be judged by a cosmic squirrel deity? Congratulations? Looking back, every element of this game was building to this moment. Those cheerful tutorial messages that became warnings, the educational game facade that cracked to reveal cosmic horror. Even the scoring system, this thing that seemed so arcade-like and gameplay-focused, was actually tracking your sins, building your case file for Judgment Day. It's like, you know those old religious parables about pride and vanity leading to damnation? This is that, but with office supplies and rodents. It's a morality tale where the moral is, maybe don't staple squirrels to corpse because God will absolutely notice and they will not be happy. And sure, there are other horror games that use seemingly silly premises. Five Nights at Freddy's made Chuck E. Cheese terrifying. PT made you afraid of an endless hallway. Iron Lung made you scared of a janky submarine in an ocean of blood. Well, I mean, that one's kind of fair, actually. But none of them quite manage what Squirrel Stapler does. Because this game doesn't just scare you. It doesn't just make you uncomfortable. It makes you complicit. Every squirrel that you hunt, every staple that you drive in, every time you visit that sin shack, you're actively participating in your own damnation. And you keep doing it, because it's just a game, right? Just a silly little game about stapling squirrels. Until it isn't, until you're standing in that forest, listening to that choir of judgment, realizing that everything you've done has led to this moment. And that's what makes Squirrel Stapler brilliant. It understands that the scariest things aren't the monsters or the jump scares. It's the slow realization that everything you've been doing, everything that seems silly or absurd or even funny at first, was actually leading you towards something terrible. Until it isn't. Until you're standing in that forest, listening to that choir of judgment, realizing that everything you've done has led to this moment. And that's what makes Squirrel Stapler brilliant. It understands that the scariest things aren't the monsters or the jump scares. It's the slow realization that everything you've been doing, everything that seems silly or absurd or even funny at first, was actually leading you towards something terrible. Remember our story within a story. The lady. Let's talk about how it ends, because it's not just some random creepypasta the game throws at you. It's a mirror, reflecting everything that's happening in the main narrative, just slightly twisted. That final part you find on day 5, right before God shows up, goes like this. The artist, standing there in his horror, turns to the old woman and asks, "What is this unspeakable horror that you have brought to me? How can I ever escape what has been done here?" And the old woman, who's been this catalyst for everything terrible in the story, just looks at the bloody mess and says, "Well, young man, this will make a mighty fine stew." Think about that progression. An artist becomes obsessed with beauty, creates something unnatural. It goes horribly wrong, and in the end, his attempt to preserve beauty just leads to more corruption, more horror. Sound familiar? But wait, because we've got another story thread to pull on. Those reports in the bunker, they've been getting progressively more unhinged. But that final report, that's where things get really interesting. Day 5's report just reads, "Please disregard previous reports. Everything is quiet." That's it. After days of increasingly paranoid ramblings about things in the walls looking for brains, about twisted squirrel corpses, about impending doom, suddenly everything's fine? Nothing to see here? Let's track the progression. Day 1, some odd noises, probably squirrels. Day 2, keep finding dead squirrels outside. Day 3, there's something in the woods we didn't expect. Day 4, it's in the walls now, looking for my brain. Day 5, everything is quiet. 3 stories, 3 different perspectives on the same descent into madness. Our protagonist with his corpse wife and squirrel stapling obsession. The artist with his half-woman painting and tragic stew. And this unnamed reporter watching it all fall apart from their bunker. Each story is about obsession, about trying to control or preserve something beautiful. The artist with his painting, our protagonist with his beloved. Even the reporter trying to maintain this facade of scientific observation, even as reality seemingly crumbles around them. And they all end the same way, with a kind of horrible acceptance. The artist and old woman make their poisoned stew. The reporter decides that everything is fine. And our protagonist, he gets to stand there and wait for divine judgment. What makes this work is how these stories inform each other. That bunker reporter, they're watching our story unfold from the outside. The lady tale, it's like a preview of where our obsession with beauty and preservation leads. It's like, you know how in Lovecraft stories you often get multiple perspectives on the same horror? Letters, diary entries, newspaper clippings. This is doing the same thing, but with educational game tips and fairy tales and scientific reports. And in the end, all 3 stories converge on the same point. Sometimes the horror isn't what happens to you. It's in that moment of realization. That moment when you understand exactly what you've done, what you've become. And all you can do is stand there and wait for the consequences. You know what's actually incredible about Squirrel Stapler? It never breaks character. Even as reality is crumbling and God is about to judge you for your squirrel stapling crimes, it maintains this facade of being an educational hunting game. Like, let's really think about the UI design. You've got these bouncy floating pickups for health and ammo that look like they belong in a humongous entertainment game. You know, those old kids point-and-click adventures? Putt-Putt, Freddy Fish? Except instead of helping you solve puzzles, they're helping you commit crimes against nature. The game keeps these elements right until the end. Even when ghost squirrels are attacking you, even when demon bears are hunting you, you've still got these cheerful little floating icons bouncing around. It's like if Doki Doki Literature Club kept showing you cute stickers while everything went to hell. And then there's a scoring system. Oh boy, the scoring system. Not only does the game track your score like some kind of arcade cabinet, it literally has the sin check, where you can boost your points. It's like imagine if Oregon Trail had a side activity called committing war crimes for extra points. The best part? The game never explains what the sin check is or does. It's just there. This little building you can visit once per day to increase your score, because apparently even cosmic horror needs a high score table. But let's look at how these educational elements evolve. Day's 1 tip is this helpful little nugget about using your map. Standard tutorial stuff. By day 5, it's just good luck. That's it, that's the tip. The game's basically saying you're on your own, kiddo. Hope those map reading skills help you with divine judgment. Even the core gameplay loop stays consistent, right up until the end. You're still hunting squirrels, still using your scope, still collecting your quota. The game never stops pretending to be this educational hunting simulator. It just keeps adding layers of wrong on top. And then we get to that timer, the final 2-minute countdown. Even that maintains the aesthetic. It's got that same bouncy font, that same cheerful UI design. It's like getting a time's up message in a math game, except instead of taking a multiplication quiz, you're about to face cosmic judgment. What makes this work is the commitment to the bit. The game never winks at the camera, never breaks character. Even when everything's gone completely off the wall, it maintains this facade of being a legitimate educational tool. I mean, also look at the ending screen. You've just been confronted by a cosmic entity, and the game just gives you a "you win" message like you just finished a level in Math Blaster, complete with your final score, which, by the way, has been tracking your sins this entire time. It's this dedication to the format that makes both the humor and the horror work, because every time you start to get comfortable with the silly educational game elements, the game uses those same elements to remind you of what you're actually doing. Like, you'll be reading this totally normal tutorial about how to use your rifle scope, and in the background is the skinless corpse you've been decorating. The game never lets you forget what's actually happening, but it keeps presenting it in this cheerful, educational way. Even those voices announcing God's arrival, they're mixed with the same kind of background music you'd hear in one of these games. It's like if Number Munch had suddenly started playing Gregorian chants while you were solving math problems. The genius here is that the game understands exactly what makes old educational games unsettling in the first place. There's always been something slightly off about them. That forced cheerfulness, those repetitive actions, those bouncy sound effects. Squirrel Stapler just takes that inherent wrongness and cranks it up to 11. Let's go back to where this all started. A man in a cabin, looking at his beloved's corpse on the wall, thinking, you know what could make this better? Squirrels. It sounds absurd, it is absurd. But that's the thing about obsession. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It just has to make sense to you. Every day our protagonist goes out hunting. Every day he brings back more squirrels. Every day he tries to make something dead look beautiful again. And isn't that what we're all doing, in our own ways? Trying to preserve things that are already gone? We see it in the artist's story too. He wants to capture beauty so badly that he's willing to believe a paintbrush made from a beautiful woman's hair will somehow let him create it. When that fails, he tries to bring his painting to life. When that goes wrong, he tries to fix it with violence. Even our bunker reporter, desperately trying to maintain scientific objectivity, even as reality falls apart around them. They're obsessed with preserving their own sanity, their own understanding of the world. But here's what makes Squirrel Stapler's take on divine judgment so interesting. It's not just about punishment, it's about recognition. When God arrives, it arrives as this twisted, massive version of the very things that you've been hunting. Your judgment comes in the form of your own actions, reflected back at you. The game is saying that maybe divine judgment isn't some distant, abstract thing. Maybe it's just having to truly face what you've done. Think about it. From the very beginning, the game tells you that God is coming. It's right there on the wall. But you keep going, you keep hunting, you keep stapling. Because surely it can't be that bad, right? Surely there's a reason, a purpose to all of this. The game isn't subtle about what you're doing, but you do it anyway, because that's what obsession does. It makes you ignore the obvious warnings, the clear signs that maybe, just maybe, you should stop. And beauty? The whole thing starts with a desire to make something beautiful again. But what does that even mean? Our protagonist looks at a skinless corpse and thinks squirrels will make it beautiful. The artist looks at a half-finished painting and thinks bringing it to life will make it complete. In the end, none of it matters. The beauty you were trying to create, the thing you were trying to preserve, it's all stripped away. You're left standing there in an empty forest, waiting for judgment, with nothing to show for it, except a high score in a game that was warning you the whole time. Maybe that's the real horror of Squirrel Stapler. Not the ghost squirrels, or the demon bears, or even God itself, but the way it shows us how easily we can justify anything. No matter how twisted, no matter how wrong, if we convince ourselves we're doing it for the right reasons. Because in the end, when those voices start calling out, God is coming, when you're standing there in that empty forest waiting for judgment, you realize you can't hide behind the facade anymore. You can't pretend this was all just about hunting. You have to face what you've done. And what you've done is try to make something dead look beautiful again, no matter the cost. Okay, well, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate. I tried a different style out with this one. I don't know if you can tell. Do let me know if you enjoyed or if you prefer the old one. It's just I want to improve the content, and there's only so many ways I can actually do that. So I thought I'd try, see if I can do this. Because so far I feel like most people watch me because of the games I cover, less so for me. So as egotistical as that sounds, if you get what I mean, though. So I want to change that. But first of all, I'd like to thank the channel members. As always, thank you so much to Vinicus Franca, Icebear, Aroxano, and Icebear again. Your support means the world to me, and I'm so glad that you let me do what I do. And think I'm good enough to consider becoming a member too. It just blows my mind. Thank you all so much. Let me know what you'd like to see me cover in the future, as always, and I do hope that you enjoyed. This video did take a little bit longer to make because, different style. Just let me know if you liked it or if you didn't like it. I'd be very sad if you didn't like it, but it's just whatever. Yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye-bye.